It is my great pleasure to introduce Phil Buckellew. Phil and I go way back. We've seen a lot of years in mobile, from when it was just about the device, and now it's about the apps. And Phil and I have come to similar presentations, even though we've had different strokes to getting there. So Phil's going to talk about cloud and cognitive, kind of picking up on some of the themes that we talked about yesterday, and I'm really excited to hear about that. And Phil, take it away.
Thank you, Maribel. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. It's great to be in the sunny Southwest. I had my first batch of green chilies this morning. I'm in the market for the next one, hopefully very soon. So I wanted to spend a few minutes today to kind of give you some perspective from all of the clients that we're talking to. I'm sure there's many of you that are our clients in the audience. Talk a little bit about some of the primary market research, what we found from those research studies. Basically, give you a few examples. So hopefully they'll create some ideas that you've seen, that we've seen in other places, and then continue the dialogue afterwards. You know, I'd like to start by just kind of make it a point about mobile that I think is somewhat intuitive, but we're really seeing that whenever anybody has a good experience with mobile, that tends to be the benchmark and the expectation that's set for every other interaction they want to have with that device, whether it's with your business, as an employee, as a customer, or anyone else. And so that's really a critical piece. At the same time, you know, delivering success, as I'm sure many of you know in this room, is very, very difficult. We did some research last fall with the Center for Applied Institute, and it was, you know, we saw 2/3 of the mobile apps fail to hit all three of budget, requirements, and timing. So we know that getting it right is very difficult. At the same time, the rewards are very, very rich. You know, in some of the research that we've done, we've found 2/3 of the apps pay themselves out within a year from the leading companies. And that has led to a groundswell. Now we've got tons of companies that are building, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of apps, sometimes up to 100 apps. The leading ones in the most recent research we saw had over 20% that were building, you know, more than 10 apps. So we know that there's good, you know, results being had, but how are we to achieve them? And there's things that are getting in the way of innovation. First of all, there's a lot of me too in the mobile space. You need a differentiated approach in order to not look like your competitors. We've also seen a lot of companies will build apps, they'll throw them over the wall, and not continue to innovate around them. And so that's also a pretty much of a fatal flaw. You've got to be able to be staffed up and have your organization, you know, set up to continuously run enhancements, improvements. And you've got to make sure that you keep your audience engaged. That's where, as we talked about kind of setting it up, where things like cognitive and context are really important to create those differentiated experiences. And then finally, we've still got tons and tons of organizations that don't really have a mobile strategy and are looking for help on where to get started. So to organize kind of some of the rest of my comments, there's really a couple of areas that we're going to focus on how you overcome those obstacles, or how many of our clients are overcoming those obstacles. First of all, making sure that every employee becomes a knowledge worker. Putting analytics and capability in their hands in a mobile device to help them get their job done better. Tons of ROI is happening in that regard. You know, getting contextual experiences that involve context and increasingly cognitive that help them to create, you know, that kind of engagement that's really needed to get things going. And then finally, helping organizations to take a faster start, to get security, to only get what they need. You know, that's a misperception about IBM, candidly, is sometimes people think you got to buy everything from us, and that's really not the case. We think it's important to be able to buy only what you want and what you need. So my first customer example is RWE. This is a coal mining company based in Germany. They worked with us as a part of our partnership with Apple on a mobile-first for iOS app, one called Asset Care. And you can see behind the operator here, the employee, in the background is this crane. This thing's like as big as a football field. And it is, you know, an extremely expensive and important asset. And they needed a solution to help them do maintenance better. A lot of that was done by paper. There was a lot of inaccuracies, and they weren't really able to capture the data. So in partnering with them and our GBS teams, we built out this Asset Care app. You know, one of the interesting things that I think a lot of people miss when they're building their ROI cases on mobile is the fact that when you transition from a paper-based world to a mobile-based world, you can track so many more metrics that you were never able to get before. And if you capture those metrics and you build that into your project, then you're able to use those to do additional analytics. And so, in fact, predictive analytics is at the backbone of this ROI case that we estimate will pay out within a year. So this is an example. Now, to pull off something like this, you have to have, this is another important I want to make, you have to have the real user in the room. Many mobile projects I've seen, you'll have the manager of a set of employees inside the room. You got to get the real user. You got to get the pilot, the flight attendant, the crane operator, the nurse, the shift manager. Those people have to be in the room. And another kind of consistent trend is you need the partnership. You need at least 3 people on every successful mobile project. I was talking with Maribel about this earlier, that I've seen in the past almost 4 years that I've been working in this space. You got to have somebody from the business that knows the value you're trying to get. You got to have somebody from the IT organization that knows how to get the data out of the back end. That also includes a developer, typically with 5 years of experience. And you've got to have a designer. If you don't have a user experience designer, you're not going to be able to deliver against the use case that you need. So this is an example of how we're working to really transform the way work gets done. And that's an exciting part of the partnership that we've struck with Apple. The second piece that we think is really important is pulling in that contextual data. Making sure your app does something that people want it to do. Why should I ever have to enter my username and password into an app again? Why should I have to tell you which plane I'm on? Why should I have to tell you what was my last transaction? All of that information is typically available from back-end systems. What's important is to be able to get it and retrieve it and pull it up and set it right for the user when they need it. Now, additionally, another aspect of context that's become increasingly important and used to create differentiated experiences is the weather. You all probably saw about a year ago IBM acquired the weather company, and I'm sure many of you were scratching your heads. What is IBM doing trying to get into the weather business? But the reality is there's a tremendous amount of data that comes from the Weather Channel that is used by businesses around the world. I was on an airplane last night flying from Boston out here. We hit turbulence. I know that the pilot team was able to notify all of us in the cabin about that turbulence because they had the Weather Channel's app, and the plane that took that route right before them hit turbulence, and so sent the notifications out to everyone else that was taking a similar path. That's an example of how you can use things like weather to help shape context and build those engaging experiences that deliver value. To that end, one of our business partners, PointSource, has been working with Security First Insurance. Now, these guys are an insurance company in South Florida where you have a prevalence of hurricanes. And so what they did was they took weather data and embedded it into their insurance application. Yes, the application is very good at providing quotes in under 3 minutes and helping someone see coverage and policies, but because they were able to pull in information around the path of storms, they're able to create a more engaging experience where the policyholder has a different type of relationship where the insurance company is looking out for them, warning them if any of their house or their assets are in the path of a storm. That has led to a huge spike in new users and online payments. So the engagement has gone up as a result of the work that IBM and PointSource did with the Security First guys. The other piece that really is becoming increasingly important is cognitive. And I know we've all heard about cognitive. There's so much hype around what is AI and what is cognitive in the marketplace today. A lot of it really is kind of coming from a consumer angle that many of the large platform companies are driving. But we think critically providing tools that help employees and people to interact with business in new ways. Really what cognitive is allowing is that applications are able to see, hear, think, and talk more like humans. And that's able to make some really interesting breakthroughs. A lot of the work right now is in natural language and processing and leveraging that capability. We've worked with one of the startups that's part of our Watson ecosystem, a company called Go Moments, to build an app called Ivy. And so what Ivy does is it's an SMS-based app that hotels use to help answer questions of the people that are coming to stay there. So when we come and stay at a hotel, you're able to use an SMS message to interact with a virtual concierge that really is backed by Watson. So being able to use the natural language capabilities to understand what someone's looking for lets hotels offload simple queries like, what's the Wi-Fi password? And it allows the hotel to route calls to, like the pool guy if you're trying to order a drink from the poolside. And so that allows them to offload work, but also to create a much more engaging experience, up to 5 times more engaging is some of the results that these guys have seen. We've also done work with other hotels. There's some stories that are out on YouTube with Hilton and others in this space as well. You're going to start to see more and more of those cognitive examples pervade into many parts of the marketplace. We're also doing a lot of work with Geico. You may have read that as well in the insurance space. The other element of mobile that we've kind of come to see over the course of the years is that it's really important to take a simple, fast, and secure approach. Now by this we mean, some of the born-on-the-web companies that are disrupting the space, they're doing absolutely everything on the cloud. Well, that's really good for them, but a lot of mature organizations have a tremendous advantage that they can leverage from all the data and information that exists in your own back offices. And being able to pick and choose what you need when, taking a modular approach, is the way we think that's most effective at leveraging the capabilities that are provided in a mobile world. Let me give a quick example here. We've worked with a furniture wholesaler, Bernhardt Furnishings. They're based in North Carolina. And they basically are wholesalers. So they're selling different types of furniture for the home. There's a big show that they do every year annually. 72,000 buyers come. And so they worked with us to try to convert, all of the examples of people using paper and, having paper order forms and inventory lists. And so they worked with our Blue Mix Garage teams. It took them about 10 weeks, and they built a mobile app. Now, their goal was to really get this in the hands of 5 or 10 of their sales folks before the big show to try to accelerate, their results. They did some prep, a couple days before the show, and they, after 3 hours of training, they realized, wow, this app is great. It used design thinking on the front end as the guys from the garage worked with them to make sure it met their objectives. And so what they said was, this thing's really ready. We don't have a lot of training. It's like a good consumer app. I just know how to use it. So they went out, they bought 60 iPads, and they went into production full scale the day before the show. Now, that's an example of something that you just couldn't do with a traditional approach with backends that weren't able to scale in that way. And that's an example about how you need to kind of be able to pick and choose. But considering looking at the cloud, that's really an important part of how you move with alacrity. And that's clearly something that we see from successful companies in the space. Pfizer is another example. And this is a company we've worked with for a while. And they weren't happy with their mobile device management solution, so they came to our Mass 360 teams. They got them up and running with 20,000 employees in 30 days. And that's a pretty big statement. Now they're up to around 80,000 employees, and I think they've got almost 1,000 apps in their app store. Good examples of how, if you pick and choose, you look at the modular type solutions, you're going to be able to get value, and they don't have to do everything. A lot of times companies will start with just, basics, just an MDM solution, and then expand from there. Those are really, opportunities that we think are important, and just something that's, really important in this space. Make sure you pay attention to the user experience. That's really what your employees are going to see, and that is really where you've got to make sure. That'll bring your cost of support way down if things are self-service. That's important, not just in the EMM space, but in all the spaces of mobility as well, more broadly. So a couple of comments there on kind of how you get it done. Really, IBM supports the hybrid cloud. We know that all of our big traditional customers have backends that they've got to integrate with. And you've got to be able to do things quickly. You've got to take a DevOps approach. You need tool chains. You need DevOps tooling that will help you have those Scrum teams and those Agile teams to work at mobile speed, to continue to iterate quickly. Now, a lot of times that creates friction because you've got these front-end teams. And I talked to many clients. I was talking to a client earlier last week. They basically have a situation where there were 7 different parts of their business, 7 lines of business that went out to different agencies and different companies and got mobile apps created for them. and yet they're all integrated with their back end in a different way, and really they struggle with having any kind of governance, any kind of security or management in place. And that's really the place where we believe that taking a platform approach, looking at things like APIs, being able to use APIs to let those back-end teams have the control that they need, but then let the front teams create their own APIs and access that back end. That's really where we see a lot of growth and a lot of momentum. Picking off services from you need, cognitive services as you need, to filter them in as necessary. So, with that, IBM's got a number of different offerings here. This is my advertising slide. We got solutions on the technology side to help you build out your platform, to help with mobile security, device application management. Those are areas that we've invested in. Increasingly, looking at cognitive context, being able to pull in different types of location services, being able to pull in contextual services like cognitive, that's going to be increasingly important. And another quick point to make there on cognitive, you hear a lot of different things around cognitive solutions, and there's different ways to get started. You can get started today with APIs. We've got like 40 APIs out on Bluemix, the cognitive APIs that you can use to begin to pull in capabilities to your solutions. At the same time, there are situations where, look, Watson needs to go to school. It needs to learn the language of the space that you're in. We just made some announcements last week where we're teaching Watson how to look at security vulnerabilities. So, for example, some of the guys that were looking at all the words that exist in the security space, Watson didn't even know what those words were. It thought ransomware was a place. We had to tell it to associate with viruses and malware. But once you go through that process, then you can really see outsized impacts coming out the other side. So a number of solutions and consulting offerings. We can help you build your strategy. There's a lot of staff augmentation work. We've got mobile factories that are being used to help teams that usually have a deficiency in either design or development capabilities. And so being able to augment those are another area that we bring to bear with the consulting services. And then finally, leadership. Leaders in a lot of the Magic Quadrants and other areas. So that's pretty much the end of my prepared remarks. We about out of time, up against the clock?
We have 2 minutes for questions.
2 minutes. Anybody have a question I can help answer?
Rolling. Will you be at cocktail hour?
I will. I'll be happy to be there.
So if you want to talk to Phil about some of the interesting use cases that he's been working on in mobile, he will be around at cocktails. So with that, I think, Phil, thank you for your time, your attention, for sharing actually what people are doing in mobile.